What if I told you a tea party didn't just involve fancy cups and polite sips, but sparked the American Revolution? No, not the kind with cucumber sandwiches. Think colonists dumping tea in a harbor to say, "Take that, King George." Stick around to find out how a bunch of angry Americans and some soggy tea changed history. Hey everyone, weird and bizarre history. Today, we're diving into one of the wildest parties in history. No, not a rave, but the Boston Tea Party of 1773. This wasn't just about tea, it was a bold move that lit the fuse for the American Revolution. We'll cover what led up to it, what went down that night, and how it changed the world. So grab a cup of coffee, because tea might be a touchy subject, and let's get started. To understand the Boston Tea Party, we need to rewind a bit. It's the 1760s, and the British Empire is the big boss of the American colonies. They've got 13 colonies along the East Coast, from Massachusetts to Georgia, and they're making money hand over fist. But here's the thing, the colonists are starting to feel like the annoying little sibling who's always told what to do. Britain's calling the shots from across the ocean, and the colonists are like, we're 3,000 miles away, can you chill? The British had just fought the French and Indian War from 1754 to 1763, a big, expensive fight over land in North America. They won, but their wallet was crying. To refill the piggy bank, Britain decided, hey, let's tax the colonists. Sounds fair, right? Except the colonists had no say in these taxes. No one asked them, yo, you cool with this? This was called taxation without representation, and it made the colonists grumpier than a cat in a rainstorm. In 1765, Britain passed the Stamp Act, taxing paper goods like newspapers, legal documents, and even playing cards. Imagine getting taxed every time you shuffle a deck. The colonists were furious. They formed groups like the Sons of Liberty, led by fiery folks like Samuel Adams, not the beer guy, but close enough in spirit. These guys organized protests, wrote angry letters, and sometimes got a bit rowdy, like burning tax collectors' effigies. Britain eventually scrapped the Stamp Act in 1766, but they were like, we're still in charge, don't forget it. Then came the Townshend Acts in 1767, taxing stuff like glass, paint, and, you guessed it, tea. The colonists boycotted British goods, saying, we're not buying your overpriced tea. Women, called the Daughters of Liberty, even started making their own cloth to avoid British imports. Talk about a DIY revolution. But tensions kept rising, and things got messy. Fast forward to March 5, 1770. Boston streets are tense. Colonists are taunting British soldiers, calling them lobsterbacks, because of their red coats. A crowd starts throwing snowballs, some with rocks inside, and things spiral out of control. The soldiers fire into the crowd, killing 5 people. This becomes known as the Boston Massacre, and it's a huge wake-up call. The colonists are like, okay, now it's personal. Propaganda spreads, with Paul Revere's famous engraving making the British look like cold-blooded villains. Spoiler alert, it wasn't quite that simple, but it sure got people riled up. By 1773, Britain's like, we need to fix this tea problem. Enter the Tea Act. This wasn't a new tax, but it gave the East India Company, a massive British tea corporation, a sweet deal to sell tea directly to the colonies, undercutting local merchants. Here's the catch, there was still a small tax on the tea, and the colonists were like, nope, we're not paying any tax without a say. Plus, they didn't like how this helped a shady British company. It's like if your boss forced you to buy coffee only from one overpriced cafe, you'd be mad too, right? The Tea Act was the final straw. In cities like Philadelphia and New York, colonists refused to let British tea ships unload, but in Boston, things were about to get extra spicy. It's December 16, 1773, and Boston Harbor is buzzing with tension. 3 ships, the Dartmouth, the Eleanor, and the Beaver, are loaded with 342 chests of tea, worth about $1 million in today's money. That's a lot of tea. The colonists want the ships gone, but the governor, Thomas Hutchinson, says, no way, you're taking this tea. The Sons of Liberty, led by Samuel Adams, have other plans. That evening, a huge crowd gathers at the Old South Meeting House. They're debating what to do, and the air's thicker than a foggy Boston morning. Samuel Adams stands up and says, this meeting can do nothing more to save the country. That's code for, let's get wild. Suddenly, a group of about 60 colonists, some dressed as Mohawk Native Americans to hide their identities, marched to the harbor. Why the disguise? Well, they weren't exactly throwing a legal tea party, and they didn't want to get caught. Under the moonlight, these Mohawk colonists storm the ships. They're not here to sip tea, they're here to sink it. They work fast, hauling heavy tea chests onto the deck, smashing them open with axes, and dumping the tea into the harbor. Imagine 45 tons of tea turning Boston Harbor into the world's biggest teapot. It takes about 3 hours, and by the end, the water's a murky, tea-flavored mess. The crowd watches, some cheering, some just stunned. No one's hurt, and the colonists are super careful not to damage anything else on the ships. They're rebels, not vandals. Fun fact, some folks tried to sneak tea leaves into their pockets, but the leaders were like, no stealing, we're making a point here. They even swept the decks clean afterward. Talk about polite rebellion. The British were not amused. King George III and Parliament heard about the tea-soaked harbor and lost it. They called it vandalism. The colonists called it justice. In 1774, Britain passed the Coercive Acts, aka the Intolerable Acts, to the colonists. These laws were like a parent grounding their kid for sneaking out. They closed Boston's port until the tea was paid for, banned town meetings, and let British soldiers live in colonists' homes. Imagine a soldier crashing on your couch without asking. The colonists were livid. Other colonies rallied around Boston, sending food and supplies. It was like the ultimate group hug, showing Britain, we're in this together. The Coercive Acts didn't scare the colonists, they made them bolder. In September 1774, leaders from 12 colonies met in Philadelphia for the First Continental Congress. They're like, okay, Britain, you've gone too far. They agreed to boycott British goods again and started preparing for war, just in case. This was a big step toward unity, like the colonies holding hands and saying, we're a team now. The Boston Tea Party was the spark that lit the revolutionary fire. By April 1775, tensions boiled over into the battles of Lexington and Concord, the first shots of the American Revolution. The colonists weren't just dumping tea anymore, they were fighting for independence. The Tea Party showed Britain that the colonists weren't messing around, and it inspired others to stand up. By 1776, the Declaration of Independence was signed, and the rest, as they say, is history. The Boston Tea Party wasn't just a one-night stunt, it became a symbol of standing up to unfair power. Today, you can visit the Boston Tea Party ships and museum to see reenactments and even toss some fake tea into the harbor. It's a reminder that sometimes, a small act, like dumping tea, can start something huge, like a new nation. And let's be honest, it's probably the only tea party in history where no one drank a single cup. And that's the story of how a tea-fueled tantrum changed the world. If you enjoyed this dive into the Boston Tea Party, give this video a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next history adventure. Want more revolutionary stories? Drop a comment below and let us know what you want to see next. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Stay curious.